Welcome back to Tell Me More Stories Told Us podcast. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Today we're taking you on a treasure hunt, a digital one, overflowing with secrets, hidden fortunes, clandestine dealings.
Sounds intriguing.
We're talking about the Paradise Papers.
Ah, yes. Leaked back in 2017. Quite a fascinating glimpse into the world of offshore finance.
It is, pulling back the curtain on some of the ultra-wealthy,
From tech giants,
multinational corporations.
even royalty and rock stars.
It's like getting a peek inside an exclusive club.
A world with different rules, where fortunes are shielded, hidden from tax collectors.
And what's interesting, the Paradise Papers don't necessarily expose illegal activities.
Right. More about those legal loopholes, taking advantage of complex financial structures, all to minimize those tax liabilities.
So let's unpack this. We're talking millions of leaked documents, right?
To be precise, 13.4 million.
Wow.
Totaling 1.4 terabytes of data.
That's a whole lot of data. Where did it all come from?
Primarily a prestigious law firm, Appleby, specializing in offshore investments.
Interesting.
We also have some records from Asia City Trust, a corporate services provider, and business registries in 19 tax havens.
Tax havens always sound so mysterious.
Think of them as jurisdictions with incredibly low or even zero tax rates,
Yeah.
often located on idyllic islands or in countries with relaxed financial regulations. Magnets for individuals and companies, all looking to minimize those tax bills.
So like finding a secret island. No taxes.
You could say that. Attractive for those with the means.
And that's where the Paradise comes in.
It reflects the image, tropical, carefree destinations. But behind that facade, a complex web of financial maneuvers.
So we're talking corporations using intricate structures,
Shell company.
subsidiaries.
All to shift profits to low tax jurisdictions, exploiting discrepancies in those tax laws.
So they're playing a global game of financial chess,
You could say that.
and some pretty big names are playing.
The Paradise Papers name-dropped everyone, from Queen Elizabeth II to Bono, from Apple and Nike, even politicians and business tycoons.
Hold on. Queen Elizabeth. Now that's interesting.
It certainly raised some eyebrows. The documents revealed her private estate, had investments in funds, in the Cayman Islands, and Bermuda.
Wow. So even the Queen's financial advisors are playing the offshore game.
It really highlights how deeply embedded offshore finance is. And it's important to note, the estate emphasized all their investments were audited, legitimate, and that the Queen voluntarily pays taxes on any income from them.
Still makes you wonder how widespread this really is.
It does.
Speaking of big names, the Paradise Papers also shined a light on the tax strategies of some major corporations, right?
Absolutely. Apple, for instance, moved billions of dollars to a subsidiary in Jersey after Ireland started closing loopholes.
So they jumped from one haven to another.
Strategically navigating the global tax landscape, taking advantage of legal loopholes, variations in tax laws.
And Apple's not alone, right? What about Nike?
They transferred ownership of their swoosh trademark to a subsidiary in Bermuda, charging their European headquarters royalties to use the logo, shifting those profits to a low-tax jurisdiction.
It's a shell game. Billions of dollars moving around the globe.
A complex web of transactions designed to minimize tax liabilities, and the Paradise Papers offer a rare glimpse into how these maneuvers actually work.
Before we delve further, I want to remind our listeners, hit that subscribe button. Don't miss the rest of this deep dive, uncovering more stories from the world of offshore finance.
We'll be back with even more revelations from the Paradise Papers. Welcome back.
Now, before we jump back into those corporate tax maneuvers, I'm still thinking about some of those individuals named in these documents.
Oh, right.
Like we already talked about Queen Elizabeth.
We did.
But there were other big names too, right?
Absolutely. One that made headlines was Bono.
Bono.
Yeah, the lead singer of U2.
Oh, wow.
The Paradise Papers revealed he had invested in a shopping mall.
A shopping mall?
Yeah, in Lithuania, through a company based in Malta.
Known for those low tax rates.
So even rock stars are in on this.
It's a common theme we see. It's important to note, though, Bono maintained that his investment was fully compliant with all the tax laws.
Sure. But it still raises questions, right?
It does, about whether these complex offshore structures are really ethically justifiable.
It's a blurry line, isn't it?
It is between what's legal and what's right. And it highlights the need for greater transparency in this world of offshore finance.
Yeah, I see that.
The Paradise Papers sparked a global conversation just by shedding light on these practices.
About it.
Tax fairness, The role of tax havens.
So these papers did more than just expose individual cases of tax avoidance.
Right. They prompted a much broader debate
Ugh.
about the system itself.
Okay, so did these revelations actually lead to any real change?
Well, there were some repercussions. Appleby, the law firm we talked about earlier,
Yeah.
they faced legal action.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they sued The Guardian and the BBC
For
breach of confidence.
So they were trying to keep it quiet? Essentially, yes. They argued the leak was criminal, caused significant damage to their reputation.
Did they win?
No, the case was settled. The Guardian and BBC stood by their reporting.
Good for them.
A victory for journalism, I'd say.
Definitely. But besides those legal battles, did the Paradise Papers lead to any actual policy changes or reforms?
There was definitely a push for more transparency, stricter regulations. Governments were pressured to crack down on tax havens, close those loopholes that let corporations shift their profits.
Like a never-ending game.
It is. Government's trying to keep up with those tax avoidance strategies. A constant struggle for sure. The Paradise Papers were just a snapshot in time.
Right.
The reality is these financial maneuvers are constantly evolving, staying one step ahead of those regulators.
And that's discouraging.
It can be, but leaks like the Paradise Papers are crucial to keep the pressure on, to address the issue.
And to spark public debate.
Right. Make people aware and encourage them to demand change.
So what was the public's reaction to the Paradise Papers?
Yeah.
Was there outrage, like we saw with the Panama Papers?
It was more muted this time around. Maybe because the Paradise Papers focused more on legal tax avoidance strategies.
As opposed to?
Illegal tax evasion.
So less about breaking the law.
Yeah.
More about bending it.
Exactly. And that nuance might have contributed to the less explosive response.
Okay.
But they still sparked important conversations about fairness and equity in the global financial system.
And they highlighted the need for more transparency, right?
Yes. To shed light on those maneuvers, make it harder to operate in the shadows.
So before we wrap this part up, I want to touch on something you mentioned earlier.
Okay.
The ethical implications.
Oh, right. A crucial point. Many of those schemes exposed were technically legal, but they raised some serious ethical questions. Like when corporations use these strategies, they're depriving governments of revenue.
Revenue that could be used for.
Essential services, healthcare, education, infrastructure.
So it's not just about individual wealth.
It's about the impact on society as a whole. When corporations don't pay their fair share, those essential programs suffer.
The burden shifts.
Right onto ordinary citizens.
Suddenly, those tax havens seem less like paradises.
It's a stark contrast, isn't it? Tropical islands, hidden fortunes, versus a system that perpetuates inequality.
It makes you wonder if the system needs a complete overhaul.
It's a question worth considering. The Paradise Papers showed us just how ingrained these offshore structures are. And it's hard to imagine a future without them.
But maybe these leaks, by exposing these practices and sparking debate, are a step in the right direction.
I think so. Awareness is key. The more people understand these issues, the more likely we are to see change.
So where do we go from here? What are the solutions?
Well, one key step is for governments to work together, establish global standards for financial transparency, a coordinated effort to crack down on those havens, close those loopholes.
That's a tall order, isn't it?
It is, but not impossible. There's growing pressure to address these issues. Organizations like the OECD and the G20 are working on it.
To combat tax avoidance.
Exactly.
So there's hope for a more equitable system.
I believe so. It's slow, but change is possible. Public awareness is crucial. The more people understand, the more likely they are to demand action from their leaders.
Well said. And on that note, we'll be right back with part 3. Don't go anywhere. And we're back, wrapping up our deep dive into offshore finance with the Paradise Papers.
We were just talking about hope for a more equitable system.
One where everyone contributes their fair share.
Right, regardless of their financial status.
Exactly. It's not about demonizing wealth or success.
It's about shared responsibility.
A well-functioning society needs that.
When the burden of taxation falls unfairly on ordinary citizens, it erodes trust.
It undermines our social contract.
And it creates a cycle of inequality.
The rich get richer, while essential services get squeezed.
The Paradise Papers showed us the consequences of this imbalance.
So what can we do about it, beyond government action?
Well, awareness is key.
Educate ourselves.
Exactly. Understand how offshore finance impacts us, all of us.
Knowledge is power.
It is. And use your voice. Talk about tax fairness. Support organizations pushing for transparency.
Contact our elected officials.
Let them know this matters.
It's about accountability.
Making sure they prioritize policies that promote a more just and equitable society.
Collective action can make a difference.
When enough people demand a fairer system, things can change.
We're not powerless.
Not at all. Every voice matters. Speak out, demand transparency, demand accountability.
We can build a more just and equitable world.
We can.
Well said. That brings us to the end of our deep dive into the Paradise Papers.
It's been an eye-opening journey.
It has. And to our listeners, we hope you learned something new today about the world of offshore finance.
Keep those questions coming. Keep those conversations going.
And remember, even small actions can make a difference.
They can.
Thanks for tuning in to Tell Me More Stories Told As podcast. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.